I'm drinking. Mm-hmm. Come on, live.
This is uncut. Can't get enough. The truth ain't holding back. This ain't no fluff. You are deserving that. Sometimes it's rough. No, I ain't holding back. Cause this is uncut. This is uncut. This is uncut. No, I ain't holding back. Sometimes it's rough. This is uncut. This is uncut. The truth is deserving that. This ain't no bluff. This is uncut. Can't get enough. The truth ain't holding back. This ain't no bluff. You are deserving that. Sometimes it's rough. No, I ain't holding back. Cause this is uncut. This is uncut. This is uncut. No, I ain't holding back. Sometimes it's rough. This is uncut. This is uncut. The truth is deserving that. This ain't no bluff.
Happy Saturday, Turks and Caicos, and thank you for tuning in to Uncut with myself, Walandra Elliott, and Miss Sabrina Greene, the Director of the Human Rights Commission. And we just want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules for listening to this important message. And I just want to thank you, Miss Greene, for coming on with me.
Thank you for having me.
So, of course, with this COVID craziness, everyone is frantic as to the new normal, and there's a lot of things that we have to get adjusted to. So we're going to speak about human rights in relation to all of these new COVID changes a little bit later on in the show. But to start with, help to give us a, try to give us a brief outline of what exactly the Human Rights Commission does.
Okay, the Human Rights Commission is a good governance organization. It's, what would you say, a watchdog institution. Our primary responsibility under the Constitution is to act as an institution which protects good governance. Our responsibilities are both to promote and protect the rights of all people within the Turks and Caicos Islands, regardless of any identifying factors such as race, nationality, or gender. One of the methods we use to do this is to both advise and hold governments to account in circumstances where human rights are impacted, yes? But our daily work is varied. We write articles both to promote understanding of specific rights and to steer the government or organizations where those rights are not being respected. We identify and report upon major human rights issues within the Turks and Caicos Islands. We monitor places of detention, and we report upon rights abuses and conditions and make recommendations designed to improve rehabilitation of inmates. We advise government on how to meet these responsibilities under specific human rights conventions and lobby government to extend more rights to the public in the form of new treaties. And of course, we take reports of human rights issues daily and work towards effective solutions for all our clients.
That was a lot to unpack. So there's a lot that falls under your portfolio. So of course, there's a lot of questions that ran through my mind, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions that ran through the viewers' minds. And so we all know that education has always been a hot topic here in Turks and Caicos. It has always been one that people of this country has been passionate about. And one of the questions that we all would like to know is, especially with COVID now changing our learning from in classroom to online, what can be done, or is it even the government's responsibility to ensure that these students have access to the education? Because now they don't have to physically go into a classroom. Now they need a computer. Now they need internet, and and these aren't things that parents can necessarily afford for their children anymore.
Well, we are aware that government has invested in procuring devices for children whose parents cannot afford laptops or tablets. Whilst the commission cannot get devices for people, it's
Right.
not our responsibility. If they are struggling to support their child's access to education, then that is a right that's being infringed upon, and this is where the Human Rights Commission comes in. We have a responsibility to ensure that a child within the Turks and Caicos Islands has access to education. And one of the challenges that we currently encounter in terms of education has been a trend for the Commission where it is school placement. There are many persons within the country who have challenges with getting their children registered for enrollment into public schools. And this is when it becomes the Commission's mandate to ensure that all children in the Turks and Caicos Islands have access to education. Now, I know that is a hot button issue right now in the Turks and Caicos Islands because let's face the reality. COVID has rendered a lot of families now unable to afford private school tuition. And if you can't afford private school, of course, the government education system should be made accessible to your children. And we will do all within our powers as a commission to ensure that your child gets placement. So I would like to urge all persons in the Turks and Caicos Islands whose children had not secured a place as yet, please come into the commission and allow us the opportunity to resolve this issue for you.
Yes. So also, I know that you said that, of course, Human Rights Commission it's not the Human Rights Commission responsibility to provide devices. However, if a child doesn't have access to a device and they've pointed this out to either the government school official or the responsible government department, which would be the education department, and nothing has come out of it, can they turn to the human rights at that point, the Human Rights Commission at that point?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They can turn to the Human Rights Commission. And during the lockdown period, when we first went on lockdown, there have been families who had struggles with getting their children online to do these classes. What we have done at the commission is we've reached out to various schools that these children may have attended, and we speak with their guidance counselors, give them the names of these persons who are struggling. And, you know, there are some people who don't have basic access to internet. So online learning is another challenge for these persons because income households are struggling to put food on their tables. Internet is not a priority as far as they're concerned. So we have been speaking with the education department and with the school's guidance counselors to give us the names of these persons who are in need of internet devices that will better enable these children to be able to access school. That is the best that we can do in terms of the commission's mandate, other than writing to government and seeking assistance on behalf of these children. And that's what we're doing. So I would urge any person who is listening to this show right now who may be encountering some form of challenge in terms of getting their child either registered or access to the tools required in order to learn in this new environment.
Right. And you also pointed out the fact that a lot of parents are struggling to provide food for their children. And of course, one of Human Rights Commission's mandate is to ensure that a sufficient standard of living is upheld. What can persons do for those people who are struggling? Many persons have claimed that they've been evicted in these tough times, and pretty much they did not know what to do. So they just had to leave.
It's a very, very incredibly complex question here that Human Rights Commissions are faced with when it comes to standard of living. However, you know, there has to be some sort of median where both government and private sector can come together and assist persons with the struggles that they are encountering. What we would recommend, though, however, is that whether it applies to the current situation, what I'm about to say now, it's arguable, because the right to an adequate standard of living applies to so many aspects of our society, but it is primarily about good governance. It applies to a healthy environment, good sanitation, sensible planning laws, access to services, and adequate housing. It applies to a variety of forms of regulations, such as food standards and environmental health. It can be argued that it applies to setting and maintaining a minimum wage, but none of these really address your questions in the current context, yes? Probably the right that we should be talking about is under Article 9 of the International Convention of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the right to social security. This is loosely catered to in the TCI through the National Insurance Board, yes? So we have seen that COVID has crystallized some of the weakness that may exist, not just in the Turks and Caicos, but we can say across the world. In the TCI, our welfare system needs to be more robust to cope with the events such as pandemics and economic crashes that exist. And while pandemics are relatively very rare, economic crashes tend to happen in roughly 10-year spans. There are things we can do as a country to be better prepared in the future, but putting in place a more robust welfare system would require further taxation. Who wants taxation? No one wants it, so there's going to be some kickback with that. I personally would have no problem paying an increase on my NIB contributions by 1% to enable in Turks and Caicos families. It would have helped everyone if they had funds to issue checks on a bi-weekly basis, if, or twice a month to persons who are struggling or affected by the national shutdown and with the lower numbers of tourists coming into the country. The Commission has recommended these and other changes in the past in an effort to tackle social inequality across the archipelago, and will continue to advocate for social change in the future. So we do identify that there is a need for an adequate standard of living here in the Turks and Caicos, because the margin is very, very wide between those who are doing well and those who are not doing very well. And as I've said earlier, I would have no problem paying a 2% of my NIB contributions if it's going to help my fellow Turks and Caicos Islanders to be able to sustain their families.
Right, that's true, but this comment isn't necessarily directed to you because of course you have no control of it, but something else that we need to seriously take into consideration is the tax breaks that we give those in the tourism industry. So often we've seen our government giving tax breaks, and that money could now have been used to feed so many people and to help to secure a proper welfare system. So I know that doesn't fall under your umbrella, but it makes sense. And as everybody,
my pay grade.
It makes sense, right?
Yes.
So of course, everything is basically centered around COVID now because our lives has changed so much due to COVID. So of course, a lot of my questions are now COVID related. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions is, since COVID has changed the world, of course, our government has to implement a lot of laws, and people have been questioning these laws as to whether it is illegal, whether it is against their human rights and all of these different things. So one of the laws that we are currently facing here in Turks and Caicos is, of course, this curfew. And a lot of people have been condemning it and against it. And we would like to know, is it against our human rights? Of course, we know that it's a pandemic. Just shed a little bit of light onto how pandemics change the way of living for everyone.
I can understand the concerns of persons who feel that their rights have been infringed upon because of the lack of freedom of movement. That in itself is a right, but it's more of a complex issue. Yes, there are some rights that are considered absolute, like the right to life or the right to not enslave anyone. Those are absolute rights. There's no compromising when it comes to that stuff. Right. But governments have the right and the responsibility to limit rights in certain circumstances. This process is called derogation of rights. And international law only allows for derogation of rights under very extreme circumstances, where there is clear evidence that the restriction of certain rights is required for the overall protection of the public. We have seen this recently in the response by government when it came to the lockdown because of the global health pandemic, yes? But we can also say we saw this in curfews placed in Grand Turk after the passage of hurricanes in 2017. There was limited movement that was required, and it was for greater good. Mm-hmm. The Syracuse Principles are a set of rules that guide governments in the derogation of specific rights. And under Principle 25, the government of the Turks and Caicos Islands were clearly within their remit to enforce a lockdown in response to COVID-19 here in the Turks and Caicos Islands. Whilst governments have the power to derogate rights in certain circumstances, they also have the responsibility to ensure that any regulations put in place to limit our rights are constantly monitored and reevaluated as the situation changes or even stabilizes. You can be sure that the Human Rights Commission is monitoring and ensuring that all rights of Turks and Caicos Islanders and those residents within this country are being protected in doing so.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Another hot topic that has arose since COVID is the Public Order and Criminal Justice Bill 2020. So for those of you who may not know it by its official name, it is the bill that was referred to by Mr. Mark Folkvord as the Shut Up Your Mouth bill. And that has received so much controversy. We have heard from politicians, political parties, as well as Turks and Caicos Island citizens in general, as to the way we feel about this new, well, not new law, because they did put a halt on it for it to be reviewed. But does the Public Order and Criminal Justice Bill 2020 infringe on persons' freedom of speech?
Here we go again with another complex issue. And I have to tell you, Ms. Elliott, you have certainly done your research. You have certainly done your research. I would like to say that I believe in freedom of speech. But in having that freedom of speech, it comes with great responsibility. Yes, freedom of speech is a contentious issue in many ways because, as with all rights, it also comes with personal responsibility, as I've just said. Expression is critical to the functioning of a democracy. It is very, very important. Any democratic society wants people to be free to express their concerns and view their issues, publicly. Right. We all must be able to speak out against government, and we do so on a regular basis in the TCI. But we also have the right to security. And one of the fundamental roles of government is to protect us, their citizens. Around the world, freedom of expression has also been used to defend racism, misogyny, homophobia, and a variety of other forms of hate speech. From perspective, there is no right to cause harm to others, whether it be physical or through hate speech. What the bill makes clear is that for speech or messages to be considered a criminal offense under this ordinance, the language must be extreme, not just offensive. We all have a right to express our displeasure, but we also have a responsibility to that right wisely. If you repeatedly threaten to cause harm to someone or their family, you will cause them legitimate fear. You are breaching their rights. These are rights where we need, this gives rise to situations where we need to balance rights and persons' freedom to express themselves. We need to find the point at which your right to express yourself becomes less important than my right to live in fear. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right. So in this commission is not concerned that the bill curtails individuals' freedom of expression. What we are concerned most about is how this bill will be enforced. There will need to be extensive training across the criminal justice system here in the Turks and Caicos Islands to ensure that the ordinance is used properly and appropriately. But the commission would expect to be consulted in this process. So we will be a part of the consultations. We will be there and pointing out our observations and what our concerns are for the protections in the Turks and Caicos Islands.
I think it's important to also point out the fact that this is considered a governance bill. So this is a bill that has been implemented. We've seen it implemented across many British ruled Caribbean countries.
Yes.
So we're not the first to receive this bill. However, we've also seen the way things have gone with them, which is probably why the panic arose when the bill came to our shores. So hopefully we learn from our neighbors' mistakes and we fix the holes that need to be fixed before we bring it into play.
Absolutely. But I would say to Turks and Caicos Islanders that we must be responsible in our speech because you're going to be accountable for it.
Yes, definitely. So we went through a whole slew of COVID issues and all that good stuff. How or at point should person get in contact with the Human Rights Commission once their rights have been infringed upon? Because of course there is a chain of command that you must go through.
Okay, if you think that your rights or even the rights of someone else may have been breached, you can contact us. However, if you are aware there are other systems in place, other agencies that can assist you, such as if you have a labor issue, quite naturally, it should be referred to the Labor Department. You should go to them first. You don't get the satisfaction or you don't feel you were accommodated, that is when you would come to Human Rights. If you have tried to work with this agency, but you still feel, that they are doing absolutely nothing to assist you, this is your feeling, this is when you come to Human Rights. Some persons even come to us, and what we do is direct them to the relevant authority that can assist them. And most of the issues that come before the Human Rights Commission are not necessarily human issues, but we count it a teachable moment where we are given the opportunity to educate the public on what their rights are, and we do all within our powers to assist them. So we would kind of be like hovering over the situation once the referral leaves our office. If it's referred to the Health Department, Labor Department, it is when Human Rights now monitors the situation to ensure that that person's issue is handled adequately.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And just a question that kind of popped in my head, because of course you said that Human Rights Commission is responsible for detention centers. Does the prison fall under that umbrella?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, you can't imagine a person more vulnerable than someone who's under the care of another person. And that applies to prisons and detention centers, yes. Right.
So of course we've seen videos with prisoners claiming that they have been deprived of food on multiple occasions. Has the Human Rights Commission looked into that and investigated that? Or does it have to be something that is officially reported before an investigation takes place?
No, we have on our team, we have persons that scour social media for issues, topical issues that arise of a human rights nature in Turks and Caicos. And at the very instant, once we get wind that there's a situation going on in the prison where someone may be deprived of food, of course, the Human Rights Commission, we investigate and we reach out to the prison immediately to find out exactly what is transpiring. Oftentimes, I've seen the live videos of what goes on in the prison, and there have also been allegations of persons accusing human rights for spoiling the prisoners. Have absolutely nothing to do with the day-to-day management of the prison. If someone is stating a claim that they are not being fed, which is something that should happen for that individual, of course, it is our job, it's our responsibility to step in and inquire whether this is indeed factual and that we can assist the individual in getting what he is supposed to have. So yes, we monitor closely the prison. We do reviews on the prison from time to time. We go and do assessments on the facility and make recommendations and our findings to government and the prison superintendent. So the prison it has been, since I've been in my capacity as director in human rights, it has been a very hot button issue here. because I've done a report in 2018 and I've gotten a lot of flack for it because my position on the conditions of the prison as they were quite damning, and of course they were not pleasing to government. So the office caught some flack for it, but we stand by our position still today. The prison is in need of great infrastructure, works being done to it, as well as rehabilitation programs. Ms. Elliott, we have to be reminded that, you know, prisoners are human beings, and if we cannot afford to place people in an environment and treat them like animals and expect for them to come out and behave like human beings. So yes, we do make representation and ensure that the rights of prisoners are protected. It's our job, it's our responsibility, and we're unapologetic in that approach.
Yes, I think we have to, as a nation, be more humane to the prisoners and understand the position that they're in, because they're thrown into this cage with absolutely no rehabilitation being taken place, because infrastructure does cover their basic needs to a certain extent, but reoffenders because they don't know how to live within the society. They don't know how to assimilate. They don't know how to get a job. They don't know how to behave on a job. Some of them, they were in jail from they were kids, so they literally haven't even acquired any skill sets while they were in the prison. And we expect for them to just be thrown back into our society and sink or swim.
Well, you know,
so I think that
the government, I believe sometime last year, I want to say it could have been later than that, had implemented a Chance for Change, a program where social development were working closely with the prison and creating programs for persons once they are released, giving them access to housing assistance, as well as aligning them with different organizations and companies where they can have an opportunity to employment. Because part of the issue is, the reality is, if you come out of prison, quite naturally you have a police record. If you have a police record, it's a requirement for you to get a job. So essentially, anyone that is released from prison, they are relying on a favor or a bribe from a company to say, put in a good word for me so that I could get a job. Because any other organization here coming out of the gates, they're asking you for a police record. And once you have a police record, you know, this employer will not be interested in taking you on. I think the program, A Chance for Change, if it's in effect already, should be working closely with private sector companies, allowing these companies to say, you know what, let me take a chance on one of these individuals. Upon release, we're going to have even mentorship programs. It's another way to assist them. So if the person is released from prison, they would have like what you call a buddy system, perhaps, someone who they're accountable to, who can do checks on them to ensure they're staying on the straight and narrow, and get in touch with these employers to give them some assistance, give them some help with getting a job. Because no one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be a criminal today. People really citizens, you know, but we have to create an environment where they can embrace these opportunities and have a shot at being great. So I think if we can all come together and collaborate for the greater good of our country, we would have a better society. Because the reality of it is, we can all turn our heads the other way and say, it's not my business, it doesn't impact my life. But the reality is, it does impact your life, because you could be coming out of the supermarket, the bank one day, and one of these persons fall desperate, especially if they have children to feed. And I'm by no means condoning the wrongdoing, but if we're not helping them, what are we saying they should do?
Yes, very true. Is Chance, what's the program name again?
Chance for Change.
Chance for Change. Is that a program that is only focused on once they're outside of the prison system?
I believe they work closely with rehabilitation while they're inside, preparing them for the outside. Yes.
Okay, that's very important, especially for those persons who have been locked up for many years. If you're only locked up for a few months, you probably don't need as much rehabilitating to get back into the society. But if you've been locked up for many years, and on top of that, from you were a kid or in your very young adult years, you literally do not know how to live in this.
Live amongst, no, you don't. So, and they need the tools to assist them in their journey into assimilating back into society.
Yes. I think that we're all so glad and happy to hear that there's someone who cares. I think that not only the general public needs to know that there's someone who cares in terms of free people, but our prisoners need to know that as well, because I'm sure a lot of times they feel as if they're neglected and that it's them against the world. So hopefully this message does get back to them and that they know that someone is there to help them.
Well, you know, care is very, very important, because if I say to a prisoner, by my conduct, I don't care about you, what do they owe us when they get out here? Should they care about us? You know, so it's important that all of our acts come from a place of care and love for our fellow man. And it's just the building blocks to a great society and country, world.
Definitely. And it's about being genuine with it.
Yes.
It comes with genuine care, not just pretending as if you care. And I feel as if once we do that, you're absolutely right, that we will live in a more cohesive society. We will see things getting better in terms of violence in our society, which has been another hot topic here in Turks. So I'm so glad that we're able to get this message out. And I just want to thank you for coming on. And if you have any final remarks, you can just go right ahead.
Well, I want to thank you for having me. It's been great being here, having this conversation here with you. I think you're doing a very great work. I just want to urge the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands that, you know, we're here for you. The Human Rights Commission, we're here for you. With respect to complaints, your first contact should be with the Office of the Human Rights Commission. So contact us through my Facebook page. Yes, they contact us. I don't know, people managed to track down my telephone. They find various means of getting in touch with human rights. And I think it's very, very good because, as I've said earlier, some persons don't know that it is not a human rights issue. Like I get calls 2 o'clock in the morning, husband ain't come home as yet. What can you do to protect my, and I'm like, this is not a human right. I mean, there's nothing I can do to make your husband or your spouse, your boyfriend come home sooner. But you know, the only way for you to learn what your rights are is when you inquire. And I am happy that persons are reaching out to the commission. They feel they have confidence in the work that we do, in the leadership of the organization, and I am grateful for that. So I welcome persons who have, even if there's a doubt in what the understanding is, it's important to just step forward for the indigenous population of Turks and Caicos to know that yes, rights is here for you too, because there's been a consensus that the Human Rights Commission is only here to represent the fairness among us. And whilst a lot of our clients are foreigners, we really can't fault anyone for seeking help. And if they are aware of a service that is there to protect them and they're utilizing it, they shouldn't be condemned, nor should the office be condemned for stepping up and assisting these individuals. So I want to say to Turks and Caicos Islanders who may feel, you too, if you have a human rights issue, please feel free and come into our office, because there are many Turks Islanders that have come through our doors and we have assisted. But of course, when they get on social media, human rights haven't done anything for them. They want to jump on the bandwagon that it's a foreigner situation, and it's absolutely furthest from the truth. We do not discriminate against the persons that come to our office who require help. And my motto always have been from the time I got into this position, I will represent your rights like I represent those of Jaleesa's. And it can't get any more serious than the rights of my child. So I say to persons, whether you whatever your issue is, even if you feel it is a human rights issue and it's not, you will learn how we can assist you, even though it's a human rights issue. We will put you in touch with the relevant authorities to get you the assistance that you require. So we're at our office, in the IGA Plaza next to the pharmacy. You can have a conversation with us, phone us, 941-5343, and reach out to the commission. We're here for you. The other thing I'd like to say, Ms. Elliott, we got coming out soon, is the annual Humanitarian of the Year Awards. The awards this year is taking on a different theme. What we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be celebrating our pandemic heroes. Now, we know there have been many persons within the communities here in Turks and Caicos Islands that rise to the occasion to assist persons in need during these difficult times, whether it be your neighbor, a civic organization, the government, or an NGO, or just private citizens who want to lessen the burden or the load of individuals around them. And we're celebrating these individuals. We'll put out a form soon on our Facebook page where persons can tell us of individuals who have stepped up to the plate on their behalf. We know there have been a lot of NGOs out there doing work in terms of food drives and making sure persons are fed in the community. So we want to find the unsung heroes among us who have been doing this good work and not for the cameras. I often see persons says, be kind, leave the cameras at home. But I want to say that, sometimes the cameras are necessary, especially for the NGOs who are using private funding. Donors like to see where their money is being spent on. So of course it has to be demonstrated where it went. But there are some individuals among us who have been doing an enormous job in assisting persons during these challenging times. And we would like to celebrate those individuals.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yes. And I think there'll be a lot of submissions because, of course, there are so many families here that are suffering in silence, and there are so many people that give in silence, and those people especially need to be thanked. They deserve a special thanks for giving in silence, because to give someone for the show is one thing, but when you give out of the goodness of your heart, that's on a totally different level. So Turks and Caicos, let's hope that after this message, we take advantage of the services of the Human Rights Commission. I hope that we're able to build the courage, because I think living in a small society, a lot of times we feel as if these associations will get your business out. That's not the purpose, and that's not what they're about. They have confidentiality. They're here to help you. So reach out and receive the help, because there's a lot of people that are suffering in silence. There's a lot of people that don't know their rights, and you have a right to know. And that's why today's topic is human rights you ought to know.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Greene. And I hope to have you back very soon, because of course there's tons of burning questions. So hopefully we will have you back on Uncut very soon.
Whenever you're ready for me, just call on me. I'm here.
Thank you so much. Have a great
day. Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
Okay.
This is Uncut. Can't get enough. The truth ain't holding back. This ain't no fluff. You are deserving that. Sometimes it's rough. No, I ain't holding back, cause this is Uncut. This is Uncut. This is Uncut. No, I ain't holding back. Sometimes it's rough.